The air was thick with the smell of blood, and that aggressive musk unique to a werewolf alpha. She curled up in the shadows at the farthest corner of the auction block, making herself as small as possible. The faded gray cotton dress she wore blended into the crowd, like a washed-out backdrop. Her fingers clenched the apron strings at her waist so tightly, her knuckles turned white. When she was 12, her mother had tied this apron around her and said, "Tie this on and remember, you are a servant. Never look your master in the eye." But now, that apron string was her only lifeline in this hellhole. The auction hall before her was less a gathering hall and more a coliseum. The soaring dome was painted with a silver moon totem, and the walls were inlaid with the skulls of century-old wolves, their sharp fangs glowing a ghastly white in the candlelight. The air was thick with a mixture of cedar incense, sweat, and an indescribable tension, the scent of desire. The audience was filled with werewolf chieftains from tribes across the borderlands. Dressed in dark tuxedos, they sat with legs crossed, wine glasses in hand, their posture as elegant as if they were attending a high society gathering. But their eyes gave them away. Flames burned in those eyes as they leered openly at every Omega woman pushed into the spotlight on stage. One by one, they were fitted with silver handcuffs and dressed in identical, no, not dresses, but wrappings. They were wrapped like gifts, waiting for the alphas below to bid on them. This was the Silver Moon Empire's oldest tradition, and its most brutal ritual. Esteemed clan leaders and lords, the auctioneer boomed from the stage, his voice loud enough to be jarring. The beauty below hails from a branch of the White Wolf clan of the northern frontier. She is of pure blood and 19 years of age. A fat alpha with a face full of scars stood up from the audience and shouted, "You dare call this kind of trash purebred? I want a she-wolf who can bear an heir, not some defective leftovers from Silver Moon City." The entire hall erupted in laughter. The girl on stage was trembling. Tears slid down her meticulously made up cheeks, smudging her blush. She, the girl in the gray dress hiding in the shadows, closed her eyes. Something inside her chest was wrenched violently. She was no different from these girls. If her mother hadn't pressed that moonstone into her palm before dying, if she hadn't bribed the auctioneer's steward with that stone, she too would be standing on that blindingly lit platform today, being scrutinized and judged like a piece of merchandise. Her name was Ivy, 19 years old, a servant from the lowest, most humble ranks of the Silver Moon Empire. But the blood of the White Wolf clan flowed through her veins, the lineage of a family that had once ruled the entire North 300 years ago, but had since been defeated and wiped out, branded as traitors in the history books. This secret could get her head hung at the city gates, and the auction she was hiding in now was precisely the grand event that plunged the entire city of Silver Moon into a frenzy every 3 years, the mate selection auction. According to imperial tradition, all Omega women of unblemished lineage and pure blood must participate in this ritual between the ages of 18 and 22. They are officially registered by the Empire and publicly auctioned off to eligible alphas to promote the continuation of superior werewolf bloodlines. The legitimacy of this system is one of the foundations upon which the Empire was built. Every year, the Council of Elders plays this card, claiming it is the only way to keep the clan strong and a blessing from the moon goddess. But everyone knows this is nothing more than a sophisticated form of slave trade. Avi took a deep breath, suppressing the nausea churning in her stomach. She wasn't here to feel sorry for others, though her heart did ache, but to survive. Disguising herself as a man and infiltrating the service crew was the only way she could think of. The butler took a bribe to cover for her, letting her don a page's uniform and carry a silver tray to serve wine and meat to the alphas. As long as she remained quiet, inconspicuous, and invisible, Once the auction ended, she could slip out the back door, take the moonstone her mother had left her, and vanish into the crowd. She had imagined 1,000 ways to escape. Scaling the city walls, hiding in a merchant's wagon, secretly swimming across the moat under cover of a dark, stormy night. She had rehearsed every single one, but this was the one thing she had never anticipated. Just as the auctioneer was about to bring down the gavel to seal the deal, the massive doors of the auction hall were suddenly smashed open from the outside by a tremendous force. 2 massive oak doors, each 3 meters tall and clad in cast iron, flew outward, crashing to the ground and sending shards of stone flying. The howling wind and snow from outside rushed in, causing the candlelight to flicker violently as ash drifted through the hall. All sound vanished in an instant. Avi's heart felt as though it had been suddenly gripped by an invisible hand. She turned her head and peered through the gap between 2 burly alpha leaders. Standing in the center of the doorway was a man. His cloak flapped wildly in the wind and snow, and his short silver-gray hair was tossed by the gale, revealing a face as chiseled as if carved by a knife. His features were deep-set, his jawline sharp, his lips thin as a blade, his brow high and arched. In the glow of the fire, his eyes shone with a suffocating dark gold, a trait unique to high-ranking alphas, visible only when they were in a state of extreme rage or when suppressing their power. His physique was lean and powerful like a cheetah's. With broad shoulders, his long boots made a dull thud as they struck the shattered stone floor. Each step was deliberate, yet he commanded an aura of authority without a word, as if the very air in the auction hall grew heavy with his footsteps. Behind him marched 2 squadrons of black, armored wolf cavalry, every soldier's eyes gleaming with a cold light. "It's him," someone in the crowd gasped. Cassius, the Black Wolf King. Why is he here? It's over. It's over. Why would he come to a place like this? Doesn't he never set foot in Silver Moon City? His relationship with the Queen. The second half of the sentence was cut short by a low growl. Cassius, the Black Wolf King, Lord of the Silver Moon Empire's borders, and one of the most powerful alphas among the werewolf clans. The scent of blood on him was so thick, it was as if he had just stepped off the battlefield. Dark red liquid still dripped from the hem of his cloak. Whether it was the blood of enemies or beasts, no one could tell. His gaze was cold and sharp, as if surveying a barren wilderness, sweeping emotionlessly over the terrified faces below the stage. Then, his gaze came to a halt. It settled on her. Avi's mind went blank in an instant. Before she could crouch, duck, or pretend to be wiping a plate, those dark golden eyes had already locked onto her position, with the precision of a falcon zeroing in on a field mouse. It was impossible. She was using the butler's false identity, registered under the male servant's name, L, and wearing the most ordinary, unremarkable coarse cloth. She had even deliberately hunched her back as she walked to make her shoulders look broader. Though alphas could distinguish gender and lineage through scent, the moonstone her mother had left her suppressed pheromones. In theory, even a high-ranking alpha should be unable to detect her true identity. Yet at this moment, those dark golden eyes cut through the crowd, through the candlelight, through the darkness, and landed squarely on her without a hint of hesitation. "You." His voice was deep, like an echo in a valley on the eve of an avalanche. Not loud, yet it instantly silenced the entire auction hall so completely that even the sound of breathing vanished. "Come here." Everyone followed his gaze. Countless stares pierced her like knives, carving her out of the shadows. The attendant standing beside her instinctively took 2 steps back, as if she had suddenly become a harbinger of ill omen. Avi's knees went weak, and her palms were drenched in cold sweat. She didn't even have time to think about what had given her away. Her body had already obeyed instinctively. In the presence of an alpha of this caliber, an omega's physical reactions were completely beyond conscious control. She walked out with her head bowed, trembling with every step, the worn cloth shoes on her feet squeaking harshly against the gravel. When she reached him, he looked down at her. Those dark, golden pupils seemed to be burning, yet also judging. Then he reached out, his long, powerful fingers hooking her chin, forcing her to look up. The moment she was forced to meet those eyes, her heart felt as if it were being squeezed by a beast's claws. It was the absolute dominance an alpha exerted over an omega. The shudder rising from deep within her body was both fear and a kind of feverish, inexplicable longing she had never read about in any book. "What is your name?" "Aier." She had to summon every ounce of strength to squeeze out those words. "Attendant number 73. Fake," he said, his tone terrifyingly calm, as if stating the obvious. "Come up with a better lie." After saying this, he turned directly to the auctioneer on the stage, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "I'm entering this auction." The auctioneer froze, and the temporary hostess turned pale. "Lord Cassius, the mate selection auction is open only to registered, eligible alphas. I said, "I'm participating." He spoke slowly, each word striking the air like an iron nail. The entire hall fell silent. Then he looked down at her again, his thin lips curving slightly, as he uttered a sentence that made her blood run cold. "The only female omega among the 7 attendants. Your pheromones just gave away your location, and that moonstone inside you can't suppress me. What are you hiding from? By hiding here, the moonstone couldn't suppress him." Avi's mind exploded with a buzzing sensation. The moonstone was a family heirloom passed down for 100 years. Its sole function was to suppress all pheromone emissions, allowing fugitives of the White Wolf clan to blend seamlessly into the crowd. Her mother had spoken with such certainty on her deathbed. "As long as you wear it, no one in this world will be able to smell your scent." Yet this man before her had stood just 3 meters away for a single second and seen through all her disguises. He could pierce the moonstone's shield. This meant his alpha rank had reached legendary status. I'm just... Her lips turned pale, her voice trembling so much she couldn't form a coherent sentence. "I'm just a servant, Your Highness. I shouldn't be here." "You shouldn't be here." He gave a low chuckle, a smile devoid of any warmth. "Then tonight, you'll stand by my side." The moment those words fell, the entire auction hall erupted in chaos. What does Cassius mean by this? He wants that servant, a low-ranking omega with no lineage. Is that sort of trash even worthy of a bid from the king of the frontier? This defies the rules. The candidates for the mate selection auction are officially registered. He skipped everyone and picked a mere attendant. This is a slap in the face to the Silver Moon Queen. Has he lost his mind? The auctioneer's gavel thudded against the table as he tried to restore order, but his forehead was drenched in sweat and his voice trembled. "Lord Cassius, according to the Imperial Mate Selection Act, if you wish to claim priority in mate selection, you must submit an application to the Silver Moon Council and pass a bloodline verification. This is not something you can simply do as you please." The next second, a flash of silver light streaked through the room. The mahogany table in front of the auctioneer was split in two by a claw swipe, sending documents, silver coins, and wine glasses crashing to the floor. Cassius hadn't even moved. A black-armored knight standing beside him slowly retracted his claws, his gaze icy. "Do not interrupt my master when he is speaking." The entire hall fell silent once more. The auctioneer's lips had turned white. He was unable to speak. Meanwhile, Avi stood under the gaze of everyone present, beside this high-ranking alpha covered in blood, her mind racing through 3 questions. First, did he know her identity? Did he know she was a descendant of the White Wolf clan? Second, Why had he singled her out? An omega of unknown origin, with a questionable lineage, mingling among the servants. Third, if she said no, would she be able to walk out of this auction hall alive? She lifted her head and stole a glance at him. He was looking at her too, those dark golden eyes churned with a multitude of complex emotions, savagery, scrutiny, calculation, and even a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher, something that could almost be described as tenderness. He leaned in slightly, bringing his face close to her ear, and whispered 4 words in a voice only she could hear. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Those 4 words rang out with conviction, like a secret promise known to no one else. And this is the cruelty of fate. The place you think is safest is often the hunter's trap. The identity you deem most humble is precisely what draws the most dangerous gaze. When an alpha can see through Moonstone's disguise, it means all the secrets she carries will be laid bare. Those 4 words felt like scalding molten, iron pouring into her ears. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Avi's heart thudded violently against her chest. In her 19 years of life, no one had ever spoken those 3 words to her. When her mother was alive, she would only repeat, "Keep your head down, hide yourself, and don't let anyone notice you." After her mother died, she didn't even have anyone to talk to, let alone be protected by. Yet now, this stranger of an alpha, reeking of wind, snow, and blood, was telling her not to be afraid in a voice so deep it bordered on tenderness. She should be afraid. She should run the moment he turned away. She should use those few seconds while everyone's attention was still on him, just as she'd rehearsed 100 times before, to slip into the servants' passage, scale the backyard wall, and vanish into the rainy night of Silvermoon City. But her feet felt as if they were nailed to the ground. It wasn't because of the alpha's pheromone suppression, nor was it fear. It was because in those dark golden eyes, there was something she couldn't decipher. It wasn't desire, nor the cold-blooded gaze of a predator sizing up its prey. It was more like confirmation, a confirmation that said, "I finally found you." The sensation sent a chill through her entire body. The auctioneer finally snapped out of his stupor. He forced himself to stand straight, though his voice still trembled. "Lord Cassius, according to imperial law, if you truly intend to exercise your right of first refusal at this selection auction, then you must present proof of your lineage on the spot and participate in the public bidding. Those are the rules." Rules. Cassius turned his head, a dangerous glint flickering in his dark golden eyes. "Since when does the council get to set the rules for Silvermoon City?" The mate auction was established to help the Border Wolf clan restore their population after the war, for the continuation and strengthening of the bloodline. But look at it now. You've categorized and priced these omegas like livestock, scoring them on bloodline purity, appearance, and fertility, then auctioning them off to the highest bidding alpha. Is this what you call rules? This is a business transaction. His voice was not loud, but every word cut like a knife, slicing through the truth that everyone in the hall knew deep down yet dared not voice. A stir began to rise from the audience. Several old-school alphas grew grim-faced, one of them a senior member of the Silvermoon Council, Aldrich, the clan leader of the Grey Wolves. The old man stood up and tapped his cane heavily on the floor twice. "Young man, you'd better think before you speak. This system was decreed by Her Majesty, the Queen of Silvermoon, and passed as a joint decree by the Council of Elders and the Parliament. You are questioning the Queen's." Before he could finish, the black-armored knight standing beside Cassius had already moved. No one knew when. A black shadow flashed by, and Aldrich's staff was cleanly severed, the break as smooth as a mirror. The black-armored knight stood before the old clan chief, his face expressionless. "Say that again." "Do not interrupt my master when he is speaking." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Aldrich's face turned from livid to deathly pale. His lips trembled a few times, but he finally dared not speak again. Cassius didn't even glance back in that direction. His gaze remained fixed on Ivy, as if to confirm she was still there. Then he said to the auctioneer, "I don't need an auction. I will pay triple the price to buy out the final spot in this mate selection auction. Regardless of whether the council agrees or not, I, Cassius Blackwolf, am taking this woman away today." "You," the auctioneer nearly ground his back teeth to dust. "This is kidnapping. It is a provocation against the Silver Moon Empire." Bang! The door on the other side of the auction hall was pushed open from the outside, and a cold voice drifted in. "I'll vouch for him at this auction." The voice was clear and leisurely, carrying a touch of cynical languor, yet exuding an undeniable power. All eyes snapped in that direction. Standing in the doorway was a tall, slender young man dressed in a deep blue velvet tuxedo with a white rose pin to his lapel. His features were so strikingly handsome, they seemed almost unreal. He walked in with a smile, twirling a gold coin in his hand. "Lancelot Moonshadow," someone gasped. "The youngest Viscount in Silver Moon City. He's not in the Imperial capital. How did he end up here?" The man known as Lancelot walked over to Cassius and gave the auctioneer a slight nod. The auction organizers should be aware that, according to Article 71 of the Supplementary Provisions of the Imperial Mating Selection Act, the Alpha of the Border Lord holds emergency priority mating rights during a state of war. This does not require the standard registration process. It only requires the presence of a member of the Imperial Council to serve as a witness and guarantor. And I, Viscount Lancelot Moonshadow, happen to hold a voting seat in the Senate. The auctioneer's face went completely pale. How did he know about this clause? That provision was a provisional decree established 300 years ago during the Empire's Great War with the White Wolf clan of the North. Though it had never been repealed, it had scarcely been invoked since, for the borderlands had not witnessed large-scale warfare in decades. And now Cassius had just returned from the Northern Front. He still carried the scent of blood, and the aura of a man fresh from the battlefield was proof enough that he was in a state of war. It all seemed as though it had been planned in advance. Avie stood nearby, a chill running through her body as she listened. This man, Cassius, had not appeared at this auction by chance. He had come here on purpose. He knew she would be here. He knew she would be disguised as a servant, blending into the crowd. He had precisely exposed her identity, precisely invoked that legal provision known to almost no one, and precisely thrust her before everyone when she had no way out. This was no accident. It was a plan. Her fingers clenched tighter, her nails digging into her palms. The stinging pain was the only thing keeping her from losing consciousness. But why? She was merely a descendant of the White Wolf clan in exile. Once her identity was exposed, she was as good as dead. He was the Lord of the Borderlands, holding de facto control over the entire northern frontier, commanding a massive army, and not even giving the Silver Moon Queen a second thought. Why would a man like that risk everything to save her? Unless he knew her true identity. He knew she was the last surviving bloodline of the White Wolf clan. He knew the secret hidden within the Moonstone. He even knew the true reason the White Wolf clan was wiped out 300 years ago. Not the rebellion publicly declared by the Council of Elders, but because the White Wolf clan possessed a secret powerful enough to overturn the very foundations of the Silver Moon Empire. And that secret was hidden within her. The auctioneer had completely conceded defeat. He raised the gavel with a trembling hand and brought it down with a heavy thud. The sound that was meant to seal the final bid now seemed to declare that everything had spiraled out of control. Cassius paid no further attention to anyone. He reached out and grasped Avie's wrist. His grip was firm enough to prevent her from struggling. yet gentle enough not to hurt her. He led her through the crowd, past the hostile, jealous, curious, and fearful stares, straight toward the gate. Wind and snow lashed at their faces. The night in Silver Moon City was bone, chillingly cold. Lanterns swayed in the wind, casting the shadows of two figures, one tall, one short. As he pulled her along, she stumbled several steps before finally blurting out, Where are you taking me?" He didn't answer. "Why are you helping me?" she pressed, her voice trembling in the wind. "You don't even know me." Cassius paused and turned his head to look at her. The wind and snow lashed his face, tangling his short silver-gray hair, while his dark golden eyes glowed like two burning flames in the night. He spoke 5 words. "Your eyes. They're like hers." Like hers. Like whose? Before Avi could ask, the sound of rapid hooves echoed from the end of the street. A dozen or so black, armored war horses came to a halt before them. The lead knight dismounted, dropped to one knee, and spoke urgently. "My lord, urgent news from the north. The council has already received word. They say you are openly defying imperial authority. They demand you return the person immediately, or else." "Or else what?" Cassius's voice was as still as a stagnant pool. "Or else, the Silver Moon Queen will order a manhunt for you and the remnants of the White Wolf clan to be tried for treason." The remnants of the White Wolf clan. Those 4 words pierced Avi's ears like a needle, striking with unerring precision. He knew, after all. She jerked her head up to look at Cassius, but his face betrayed no surprise or panic. It was as if he had known this would happen all along, or even as if he had been waiting for it. He leaned in and whispered into her ear, "You wanted to run away, didn't you? Now the whole world knows you're a member of the White Wolf clan. Where can you possibly run? Follow me. This is your only path." And this, more than anything, was the greatest irony of fate. She had spent over a decade hiding, disguising herself, and living cautiously, believing that as long as she remained inconspicuous, she would be safe. Yet in the end, it wasn't any of her pursuers who exposed her completely, but the Alpha who claimed to protect her. His words cut through her like a knife, slicing straight through all her pretense. "Follow me. This is your only path." Avi stood rooted to the spot as wind and snow poured down her collar, the cold making her teeth chatter, yet a fire burned within her, not gratitude, not dependence, but rage. For the first time in 19 years, she had been so brutally exposed. For the first time, she had been backed into a corner with no way out. For the first time, she realized that all her plans, all her preparations, all her assumptions were as fragile as paper in the face of this man. "When did you find out?" She lowered her voice, trying to sound calm, but the tremor in her throat betrayed her. "Before I entered the auction house, or even earlier." Cassius didn't answer immediately. He released her wrist and turned to face her. The wind lifted the hem of his cloak, revealing the short dagger at his waist, inlaid with a silver moon, the symbol of the Lord of the Borderlands' authority. It was said that the blade bore the name of every successive lord, having been passed down through 6 generations. He lowered his eyes to look at her. His dark golden pupils appeared deep and complex under the dim streetlight, like a bottomless icy pool. "A month ago, after the battle in the frozen gorge of the northern frontier, I intercepted a secret letter." His voice was low and steady, as if he were recounting something that had nothing to do with him. "Someone from the Silver Moon Council has been secretly contacting bounty hunters on the black market, offering a bounty on the head of a descendant of the White Wolf clan. The reward is 50,000 gold coins." 50,000 gold coins. Ivy's pupils contracted sharply. She hadn't known she was worth that much. She didn't even know what value she possessed. that would make those people go to such lengths to hunt her down. Before her mother died, she had only told her, "You are the last bloodline of the White Wolf clan. Guarding that secret is more important than guarding your own life." But her mother hadn't said what that secret actually was. "That confidential letter detailed your movements," Cassius continued, his gaze fixed on her face like a pair of nails. "The third house on Wutong Alley in the eastern district of Silver Moon City. Working as a volunteer at the soup kitchen late at night. Selling hand-woven straw baskets at the flower market in the northern part of the city on the 15th of every month. Need I go on?" Avi's blood ran cold in an instant. All her hideouts, every step of her daily routine, every cover she'd thought was airtight. It turned out they'd been laid bare long ago. She thought she was in the shadows, but in reality, she'd been living in someone else's crosshairs all along. "If you know so much about me, why didn't you just hand me over to the council?" Her voice suddenly turned sharp. 50,000 gold coins is no small sum. You need funds to lead an army, don't you? Wouldn't it be easier to just sell me off? Upon hearing this, Cassius's thin lips curled slightly, though it was no warm smile. It was an amused expression, tinged with a touch of self-mockery. "Because to me you're worth far more than 50,000 gold coins." Those words struck her heart like a pebble dropped into a still lake, sending ripples spreading outward. She couldn't tell how much of it was true and how much was false, but she could sense a certain unwavering certainty in his tone. He wasn't joking, nor was he teasing her. He was stating a fact he considered self-evident. "Let's go. I don't have time to waste here with you." He turned again and strode toward the end of the street. "Once the council figures this out and seals the city gates overnight, you'll be trapped here for good." He took a couple of steps, then stopped when he realized she wasn't following him. He turned back to look at her. "What's the matter? Still thinking about that dusty shack of yours? Thinking about that bag of rations and the map you've stashed under your bed?" A hint of undisguised sarcasm laced his tone. "Avi White Wolf, or more accurately, Avi Moonshadow, I've already reviewed all of your escape plans for you. The sewer exit on the west side of the city has been blocked with rubble. The north gate has recently doubled its sentries, and as for that route over the wall on the south side, a building just collapsed last week, cutting your path right in the middle of the air. On your own you won't even make it out of this street." Avi's lips opened and closed, and after a long while, she managed to squeeze out a sentence. "You even know my escape routes. You underestimate the Border's intelligence network." Cassius's tone was flat, making it impossible to tell if he was boasting or issuing a warning. "Before you even set foot in Silver Moon City, everything you've done, eaten, and met over the past 5 years was already laid out on the council table at Black Wolf Castle." Cold, a chill spreading from the soles of her feet to the top of her head. She had thought of herself as a fish swimming through the shadows, unaware that someone had long since cast a net from above, counting every single scale on her body. This feeling of being completely transparent was more chilling than being hunted. "Then you should also know that I possess nothing of value worth the risk to you." Her voice was hoarse. "I don't know how to fight. I don't know medicine, and I don't know the ways of power. All my mother left me was this moonstone and a belly full of stories no one wants to hear. If you take me back, I'll be nothing but a burden to you." "Who says you can't help me?" Cassius suddenly stepped back in front of her, looking down at her. They were so close she could see the snowflakes clinging to his eyelashes and smell the scent of gunpowder mingled with pine on his body. He extended his right hand, his slender fingers brushing the moonstone, threaded on a cord just below her collarbone. The stone glowed faintly, as if sensing something. "Did your mother ever tell you that moonstones aren't just for suppressing pheromones?" Avi's heart skipped a beat. "It holds a memory locked inside." Cassius's gaze grew deep. "One your mother sealed there with her final burst of bloodline power, a truth passed down through generations of the White Wolf clan. The true cause of that war 300 years ago. about why the Silver Moon Queen was so determined to wipe out your entire clan, about the only way in this world to break that curse of fate. The reason you survived this long isn't because you've hidden yourself well. It's because the bloodline within you, combined with this moonstone, must exist together. The assassins sent by the Silver Moon Queen aren't unable to find you. They simply dare not approach you. Anyone who attempts to forcibly take the moonstone or harm you will be seared by the counter curse sealed within it. It was as if a bolt of lightning had struck Avi's mind. She recalled the words her mother had spoken before dying, in broken, halting sentences, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Don't take this stone off. Never. It is your talisman, and it is your curse." At the time, she thought her mother was just rambling in her final moments. But looking back now, every word her mother had spoken held deep meaning. "So," her voice was as dry as sandpaper, "so those people haven't touched me not because I'm inconspicuous, but because they're afraid of this stone." "Right," Cassius nodded. "You're the White Wolf clan's last pawn. The Silver Moon Queen wants to kill you but dares not do it herself. She can only send bounty hunters to their deaths. The council wants to capture you alive to study the secrets of the Moonstone. But they're afraid your mother might have tampered with it, so they've never dared to act rashly. That's why you've managed to survive until today in this ridiculous, full of holes way." "And he paused, a complex emotion flickering in his eyes. "I am the only person in this world who can remove this moonstone from your neck without triggering a backlash." Avi almost instinctively covered the stone on her collarbone and took an instinctive step back. "Don't worry, I won't take it now." Cassius watched her reaction, a faint note of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Because once it's removed, you'll forget every memory your mother left you. This stone is bound to your soul. Without it, you'd be just an ordinary Omega who knows nothing, and the entire history of the White Wolf clan would vanish from this world. What I need is to take you, whole and complete, to uncover that secret." He held out his hand, this time gesturing toward the black lacquered carriage at the end of the street. "Get in, I'll explain on the way." Avi stood there, her mind a tangled web of conflicting thoughts. She was weighing her options, struggling, wondering if she could still trust a stranger, an alpha who had snatched her from the auction block in front of the city's entire nobility. Yet she had to admit, every word he spoke fit like a puzzle piece, slotting perfectly into the fragmented clues her mother had left behind. The moonstone, the backfire spell, the true reason for the White Wolf clan's annihilation, the reason the Silver Moon Queen dared not kill her with her own hands, and the reason he was able to retrieve the stone safely. When pieced together, all of this pointed to a fact she had never imagined, nor dared to imagine. She wasn't some pitiful fugitive at all. She had been deliberately left in this world. Someone was playing a very high-stakes game, and she was the only irreplaceable piece on the board. What she didn't know was, when Cassius turned his head to gaze into the night ahead, the emotions churning in his dark golden eyes were far more complex than the words he spoke. "You're worth far more to me than 50,000 gold coins." That woman, those eyes. It wasn't the first time he'd seen them. 12 years ago, on the battlefields of the North, a blood-soaked white wolf woman dragged him from a pile of corpses. With her last ounce of strength, she bandaged his wounds, then snapped her moonstone in two, tucking one half into his hand and hanging the other around her daughter's neck. That woman said, "If one day my daughter needs protection, find her for me." Those eyes of hers, they were exactly like Avi's, standing there now in the wind and snow. That was why he'd taken this job, not for some secret of the Moonstone, not for the White Wolf clan's century-old feud, and certainly not for the Silver Moon Queen's petty affairs. He was simply here to repay a debt, to repay the woman who'd saved his life 12 years ago. Only he hadn't anticipated that when he saw those eyes again 10 years later, what churned in his heart was not just an old debt on the ledger, but also a certain stirring he didn't even want to admit to himself, a feeling he shouldn't have. The snow was falling harder and harder. Avi took a deep breath, took a step forward, and walked toward the carriage. Before she climbed into the carriage, she glanced back at him, her voice drifting away in the wind. "One last question. Once you've taken me back, what do you plan to do with me?" Casillas pulled back the curtain, letting her enter first, then climbed in himself and lowered the curtain. In the confined space, they were so close she could hear his steady breathing. He was silent for a few seconds, then spoke a sentence that instantly shattered all her defenses. "I'll give you a choice. You have the right to know the truth, and then decide who you truly want to be. Will you continue to be a rabbit, hiding and running away? Or," he paused, his gaze intense as he looked at her, "or will you reclaim the pride that belongs to your White Wolf clan?" The carriage began to move through the snowy night, its wheels grinding against the cobblestones with a dull thud. Avi leaned against the side of the carriage, clutching the slightly warm moonstone in her arms, her mind in turmoil. Her life had been defined by countless people. Her mother defined her as a secret that must be hidden. The council defined her as a remnant that must be eradicated. Bounty hunters defined her as 50,000 gold coins. Yet no one had ever given her a choice beyond her name. And this man, a man she had only truly met for the first time today, told her, "You still have a choice." And this is the cruelest yet gentlest aspect of fate. Just when you think you're a pawn at the mercy of others, someone will always appear to put the power of choice back in your hands. Whether he's here to save you or to use you, at least, from this moment on, you are no longer the passive one. The carriage raced through the wind and snow all night long. Avi curled up in the corner of the carriage, the moonstone pressed against her collarbone, flickering faintly. She dared not sleep. Closing her eyes brought the image of her mother's face just before she died. Opening them revealed the back of the man sitting across from her. Cassius leaned against the opposite side of the carriage, his eyes closed as if resting, but she knew he wasn't asleep. His breathing was too steady as a leopard lying in wait, ready to pounce on any danger that dared to approach. As dawn broke, the carriage finally came to a stop. The curtain was drawn back, revealing a dark, imposing castle standing tall in the gray morning mist. It lacked the ornate splendor of Silver Moon City, with no skyscraping spires or gilded domes. This castle was built from massive blocks of black granite, rugged, heavy, and solid, like a colossal beast lying in wait upon a mountain ridge. Black-armored knights patrolled the ramparts. Upon seeing the carriage approach, they raised their lances from afar. When they recognized Cassius, they lowered their lances in unison and knelt. "Welcome back, my lord." Cassius leaped down from the carriage, then turned and held out his hand to her. The gesture was natural, as if he had done it countless times before. Avi hesitated for a second, did not take his hand, and instead used the carriage shaft to help herself down. Her skirt was caked in mud and water. Her hair was a tangled mess from the wind, and she looked utterly bedraggled. Cassius glanced at her, said nothing, and withdrew his hand. "Arrange a south-facing room for her, and send hot water and clean clothes." Without turning his head, he said to the butler approaching from behind, "Also bring her the suit chronicles of the White Wolf clan from the study." The butler was a gray-haired old werewolf. His eyebrows twitched noticeably at the words, White Wolf clan. But he asked no questions and bowed respectfully. "Yes, master." Avi was led into the castle. The interior of Black Wolf Castle was far warmer than it appeared from the outside. The walls were hung with animal hides and weapons, and oil lamps were placed every few steps along both sides of the corridor. Their glow cast a dim, heavy yellow light over the entire castle. As she climbed the stone steps, She noticed numerous murals on the walls, all depicting werewolf hunting scenes, as well as a large totem that covered an entire wall. A massive silver white wolf stood in the moonlight, gazing up at the sky. She stopped, in front of the painting. "That is the totem of the White Wolf clan." The butler's voice came from behind her, soft as if he feared being overheard. This castle was originally a branch territory of the White Wolf clan. It was only assigned to the Black Wolf clan's control after the war 300 years ago. Avi's fingers trembled slightly. She reached out to touch the silver wolf's eyes in the mural. The moment her fingertips touched the stone wall, a tremor like an electric current shot up her arm. The moonstone grew scorching hot, and a series of fragmented images flashed before her eyes. Flames, screams, a woman running through the snow with a baby in her arms. Then came a deep wolf's howl, like a lament from ancient times. "Are you all right?" The butler hurried to steady her. I'm fine." Avi withdrew her hand, her heart pounding. Her hands were trembling, but she forced herself to steady them. "Please take me to my room." She needed to be alone, to process all of this. The room was much larger and warmer than she had imagined. A fire was already burning in the fireplace, the logs crackling. On the windowsill sat a pot of small purple flowers, blooming stubbornly in the depths of winter. Hot water and clean clothes had been prepared. A long, dark gray dress made of soft fabric, 1,000 times better than the coarse linen dress she had been wearing. But she had no heart for a bath, nor for changing clothes. She sat on the rug in front of the fireplace, holding Suving, the Chronicles of the White Wolf clan, in her hands. The pages were yellowed, the corners curled, and they were densely covered with text, written in an ancient Wolf clan language that had long since been lost. She could understand some of it. Her mother had taught her this script when she was a child, though not much. Her mother had said, "Knowing too much won't do you any good." But tonight, she no longer wanted to be someone who knew nothing. She opened the title page, where an ink drawing of a pattern, identical to her moonstone, was etched. Below it was a line of small script in her mother's handwriting. "The secrets of our clan are stored within this stone. It may not be opened by those without blood ties, nor broken by those without true love. It may not be opened by those without blood ties, nor broken by those without true love." Her fingers traced the line of text as she repeated it over and over in her mind. So the moonstone couldn't be opened just like that. Certain conditions had to be met. Blood relative, she was the last surviving member of the White Wolf clan, so she met the first condition. But what about the second? May not be broken by anyone but a true love. Did that mean she also needed someone who loved her deeply? She slammed the book shut, her face burning like fire. What on earth is this? What kind of ancient, absurd rule is this? Why does unlocking a family secret require? There was a sudden knock at the door. "Come in." She quickly set the book aside and composed her expression. The door swung open, and the person who entered wasn't the butler. It was Cassius. He had changed his clothes, wearing a dark, fitted coat with the cuffs rolled up to his forearms, revealing muscular arms marked with old scars. His hair was still damp, as if he'd just washed it. A few strands of silver, gray hair clung to his forehead. His features appeared somewhat softer in the glow of the fireplace than they had at the auction. But those dark golden eyes remained sharp. "How much of the book have you read?" He walked in, sat down in the chair opposite the fireplace, and casually crossed his legs, as at ease as someone who frequently came and went from her room. Avi clutched the book to her chest, somewhat uneasily, as if it were a shield. "I just finished the title page." "Did you read that line on the title page?" Cassius's gaze settled on her face, carrying a hint of scrutiny. "Yes." "Then you should know that to activate the moonstone, 2 things are required." His voice was so calm it didn't seem like he was discussing a matter of life and death importance to her. First, a direct descendant of the White Wolf clan, and you're the only one left in the world. Second, a genuine emotional bond. Put simply, someone who's willing to give up everything for you, including their own life. Avi's heart clenched violently. Something like that. How could I possibly find it? Her voice was hoarse. Who would give their life for someone else? I don't even know who my father is. My mother is dead, and everyone I know is leaving me one by one. Where am I supposed to find someone willing to die for me? Her words carried a long suppressed sense of grievance, as if she were asking Cassius, yet more so, as if she were asking fate itself. Cassius didn't answer. He simply looked at her, the light in his eyes flickering with the flames in the fireplace. After a long time, so long that she thought he wouldn't speak, he finally spoke, his voice very low. Your mother once saved someone she shouldn't have. That person owes her a life. If he's still alive, he'd give up everything for you without hesitation. Avi looked up abruptly. Who is that person? Where is he? He's right here. Cassius stood up, walked over to her, and crouched down so he was eye to eye with her as she sat on the floor. The firelight from the hearth danced between them, stretching their shadows long and thin until they overlapped, indistinguishable from one another. 12 years ago, in the frozen gorge of the north, your mother saved a squad leader who was surrounded by enemy forces on the battlefield. The man had been struck by a poisoned arrow and suffered a gash in his left side that cut nearly to the bone. He had lost most of his blood and should have died there. It was your mother who dragged him into a cave, used the White Wolf clan's secret arts to staunch his bleeding and counteract the poison, gave him her own rations and water, and watched over him for 3 days and 3 nights, until he awoke from his coma. Avi's breath nearly stopped. Before she left, that woman broke the moonstone she'd carried for 20 years in half. She hung one half around her daughter's neck. It was her final talisman. The other half she pressed into the squad leader's hand. Cassius paused here, his Adam's apple bobbing once, as if to suppress a surge of emotion. She said, "If one day my daughter needs protection, find her for me. Tell her it was her mother who sent her to you." He reached into his collar and pulled out a thin cord. At the end of the cord hung a semicircular stone, a moonstone, the color, texture, and pattern exactly like the one around her neck. It fit together like a token deliberately split apart, waiting to be reunited. In that moment, Avi's world fell completely silent. All sound vanished, the crackling of wood in the fireplace, the howling wind outside the window, the footsteps of patrolling knights in the distant castle. Everything faded away. All that remained in her eyes was that half-moonstone, glowing with a warm yet sorrowful light in the firelight. That person is you. She heard her own voice, as if drifting in from a place far, far away. It is I. Cassius's voice was calm, yet weighed down by 12 years. I have been searching for you for 10 years. Ever since your mother died, I have been looking for you. But your mother hid you too well, or rather, the moonstone protected you too well. The intelligence network I deployed could only ever catch glimpses of you. I couldn't confirm which city you were in or under what identity you were living. It wasn't until that confidential letter from the council, leaked a month ago, that I finally pinpointed you in Silver Moon City. He looked at her, and for the first time, all guard was dropped from those dark golden eyes, revealing the genuine emotions beneath that had been frozen for far too long. I didn't come to this auction for the secrets of the Moonstone, nor for the White Wolf clan's century-old grudge, and certainly not to challenge the Silver Moon Queen's authority. His voice was as low as a sigh. I'm simply here to repay a debt, to repay the life your mother gave me 12 years ago. The flames in the fireplace flickered quietly. Something slid silently down Avi's cheek. She lowered her head, looking at the half-moonstone around her neck, then at the other half in his hand. The two stones, less than a foot apart, seemed to sense each other's presence, emitting a faint resonant tremor at the same time. She had so much she wanted to say. She wanted to ask him what had happened that year in the frozen gorge. To ask how he'd spent the past 10 years searching for her. To ask why he hadn't shown up sooner. Even just a year, a month, or a day earlier. Then, on the day her mother died, she wouldn't have had to hide alone in that dilapidated house in the northern part of the city, crying until dawn with no one to lean on. But all those words were stuck in her throat. She couldn't utter a single syllable. Cassius watched the tears welling up in her eyes. He was silent for a moment, then did the one thing he shouldn't have done tonight. He reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheek. His fingertips were rough, calloused from years of gripping a sword. The touch on her skin felt like a spark falling into a haystack, scorching and dangerous. His movement was gentle, yet it made her freeze as if struck by electricity, her heartbeat pounding so loudly she could hear it herself. "Your mother asked me to protect you." His voice was soft, almost whispering, as if afraid of shattering something. "But by the time I found you, you had already grown up. You don't just need protection, you need the truth. So I will help you unlock the Moonstone. I will help you reclaim everything the White Wolf clan has lost. I will help you take back what rightfully belongs to you. The respect of your clan, the right to choose freely, and that power hidden in your bloodline that you haven't even discovered yet. I owe this to your mother, and I owe it to you." He withdrew his hand, stood up, and walked to the door. Before pushing it open, he paused, turned his back to her, and spoke a sentence that would keep her awake all night. "As for that saying, only true love can break the seal. If you can't find someone willing to die for you, then let me be that person." The door closed. Footsteps faded into the distance. Avi sat alone on the rug in front of the fireplace, clutching the yellowed chronicle. Scorching tears fell one by one onto the pages, smudging the ink. Her mind was as chaotic as a cloud torn apart by a gale, yet one thought grew clearer and clearer, until it could no longer be ignored. When he said those words, his tone didn't sound like he was repaying a debt. It didn't sound like he was fulfilling a promise. It sounded more like he was stating a decision he had already made long ago. And that is the most cunning aspect of fate. You think he draws near to you out of a sense of debt, out of duty, or because of a promise. But it isn't until you realize that the gaze he casts upon you in the darkness burns hotter than any of those promises that you understand. Some debts are willingly incurred from the very beginning. After that night, Ivy never asked the question, "Why are you helping me again?" She already knew the answer. That answer hung around Cassius's neck in the form of half a moonstone, emitting a warm and steadfast glow. Nor did she ask, "What price must I pay?" because she sensed vaguely that he was helping her without asking for anything in return. This selflessness unsettled her more than any condition could, for she didn't know how to repay him. A debt that cannot be repaid is the heaviest of all. Early the next morning, before dawn had fully broken, a commotion arose from a corner of the castle. Avi sat up in bed and immediately clutched the moonstone. She never took it off, not even to sleep or bathe. The stone had become a part of her body. She slipped on her gray dress, pushed open the door, and walked down the corridor toward the sound. The noise was coming from the castle's side hall. From a distance, she saw 2 rows of black armored knights standing at the entrance to the side hall, their faces tense as if ready to draw their swords at any moment. She tiptoed to peer through the gap between them, and saw 7 or 8 people seated on either side of a long table in the hall, each wearing an elegant dark cloak and pinned with the Silver Moon Empire's parliamentary insignia, a golden moon and crossed swords. Members of the Council of Elders. They had come to her doorstep. Cassius sat at the head of the long table, leaning lazily back in his chair with one foot propped on his knee. He held a steaming cup of black tea in his hand, as if entertaining a friend who had traveled a long way. But his gaze was not that of a friend. It was the gaze of a wolf sizing up its prey, cold, contemptuous, and carrying a danger that could overturn the table at any moment. Lord Cassius, we traveled through the night just to confirm one matter with you. The speaker was Cecil, the Senate's special envoy, a werewolf in his 60s with snow, white hair and face lines carved as if by a knife, his eyes narrowing to slits as he spoke. That low, ranking Omega you took from the Silver Moon City auction. We demand her immediate return to the Senate for adjudication. She is suspected of using a forged identity, illegally infiltrating the Imperial Registry venue, and obstructing the proper conduct of the mate selection ceremony. By law, she is to have all her property confiscated, face a public trial, and what? Cassius took a sip of tea, his tone as flat as if discussing the weather. And we have reason to suspect she is connected to the remnants of the White Wolf clan of the North. Cecil's voice dropped a half step, tinged with a hint of menace. This is no longer a mere matter of public order, Lord Cassius. This is treason. The air in the side hall seemed to freeze solid. All the black armored knights had their hands on their sword hilts, waiting for a single word from Cassius to turn this bunch of old fools in the Senate into mincemeats. Avi stood outside the door, her heart in her throat. Then she saw Cassius smile. It was a faint smile, his thin lips curving ever so slightly. Yet it sent the atmosphere in the side hall plummeting from freezing point into the abyss. Remnants of the White Wolf clan. He set his teacup gently back on the table. The clink of porcelain rang particularly sharp in the silence. Lord Cecil, do you know what I received this morning? Cecil froze. What? Cassius pulled a silver medallion from his bosom and tossed it casually onto the table. The medallion spun a few times before coming to rest face up, engraved with a silver wolf and a full moon, surrounded by a circle of ancient wolf clan script. That design was identical to the one on the book's title page. From last night, Cecil's face turned deathly, pale the moment he saw the badge. This is the token of the White Wolf clan's chieftain from the north. How did it end up in your possession? Because this token has been in my possession for 12 years. Cassius's tone was so calm it sent a chill down one's spine. You ask why I took that Omega from the auction. Because she is not a low-ranking servant, nor a remnant of the White Wolf clan. She is the only daughter of the White Wolf clan's last chieftain. According to the ancient laws of the Ice Plains, she is the true heir to this land of the North. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces of every elder present. And I am her guardian knight. Those words struck like a bolt of lightning, exploding through the side hall. Cecil leapt to his feet, sending his chair tumbling backward. He pointed at Cassius, his finger trembling. Do you know what you're saying? The White Wolf clan has been branded a traitorous clan by the Empire. 300 years ago, they were stripped of all rights to inherit their lands. By publicly pledging allegiance to the White Wolf clan's heir, this is nothing short of open rebellion. Rebellion. Cassius rose slowly. He towered a full head taller than Cecil, looking down on the old man from above, his voice low and gravelly, as if ground out from the depths of his chest. You know better than anyone why the White Wolf clan was exterminated 300 years ago, not because of rebellion, not because of inferior bloodlines, but because they discovered a secret they shouldn't have known. A secret capable of shaking the very foundations of the Silver Moon Empire. Do you intend to lay all your cards on the table right here? Cecil's voice trembled, but he gritted his teeth and held his ground. Do you want to expose my involvement in those events as well? Don't forget, your name was on that purge list too. I know. Cassius's voice was flat, but Avi, standing outside the door, clearly heard a momentary pause in his words. It's the thing I regret most in my life, but it's also the reason I'm still alive today. Because I have a debt to repay. Cecil's lips trembled several times before he finally managed to squeeze out, "Hand that woman over, and we'll pretend this never happened. Cassius, I'm giving you a way out. Don't be ungrateful." Just then, a gray figure stepped through the doorway. Avie. She wore that dark gray long dress, her hair simply tied back, a moonstone pendant hanging before her collarbone, casting a faint silver glow in the firelight. She didn't walk quickly, but each step was as steady as if she were rooted to the ground. All eyes in the side hall snapped toward her. When Cassius saw her enter, his brow furrowed. It was a look of concern, but he didn't stop her. "There's no need to talk anymore." Avie walked to the long table, stood beside Cassius, and looked straight at Cecil. "I am the daughter of the White Wolf clan's chieftain. Lord Cassius did not bind me, nor did he coerce me. I came back with him of my own free will." Cecil's eyes widened like copper bells. You admit it? You admit you're from the White Wolf clan?" "I admit it." Ivy's voice was far calmer than she had imagined. "What do you intend to do? Take me back? Try me in the name of the Silver Moon Queen, or simply kill me right here?" Her words left Cecil speechless. The council truly dared not lay a finger on her, not because they feared her combat prowess, but because of the moonstone around her neck. The backlash curse sealed within it was a minefield none of them dared to touch. Killing her, or forcibly seizing the moonstone, would trigger that ancient power, powerful enough to destroy half a city. Cecil's expression shifted repeatedly, finally settling into a grim, venomous grimace. He snorted coldly, withdrew his gaze, and turned to Cassius. "If you refuse to hand her over today, so be it. But I warn you, the Silver Moon Queen is already aware of this matter. She will make her decision within 3 days at the latest. When that time comes, it won't just be us old fools who show up. I'll be waiting." Cassius sat back down, picked up the cup of tea that had grown lukewarm, and made a gesture to dismiss his guest. "No need to see you off." Cecil, accompanied by 7 or 8 elders, stormed out in a rage. As they passed by Avie, Cecil shot her a vicious glare. That single glance held so much resentment, anger, fear, and a sense of guilt she couldn't quite decipher. The doors to the side hall closed once more. Only then did the tension in Avie's shoulders ease. She exhaled a long, heavy breath and realized her palms were drenched in sweat. "You shouldn't have come in." Cassius's voice came from behind her. He stood before her, looking down at her with a furrowed brow. "You've just effectively admitted your identity in front of the Council of Elders. From this moment on, you can never go back to those days of hiding in the crowd and going unnoticed." "I know." Avie looked up at him, her gaze unusually resolute. "But what good is it for you to shoulder all this alone while I hide in my room looking at murals? This is my own business, not yours. I am the heir to the White Wolf clan. Since you've given me this choice, I'm taking this path." She paused, her voice dropping, yet her tone remained unwavering. "Besides, I have no other path to take, do I? If I am destined to die, I would rather die standing than continue living cowering in the shadows, like I have for the past 10 years. Her words were like a pebble cast into the deep, still waters of Cassius's eyes, sending out ripples. He looked at her, and it took several seconds before he spoke, a faint, almost imperceptible emotion in his voice. Part pity, part relief. "You're much stronger than your mother ever imagined." Avie's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let it show. She turned her back to him, pretending to adjust her cuffs, her voice as steady as she could manage. "What should we do next? Once the council returns, they'll surely bring more people." Cassius walked to the window and gazed at the distant horizon, which was gradually turning pale. Morning light pierced through the clouds, casting the shadow of Black Wolf Castle long and slender. He was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his tone carried an unwavering resolve. "Tonight, I'll take you to see something left behind by your mother. Something that can only be unlocked by those of the white wolf lineage. That object is hidden deep within the frozen gorge of the north. It was there that your mother saved me all those years ago. Inside the moonstone lies a complete memory she sealed away. It requires your blood along with the willing consent of another to truly unlock it. Before I found you, I thought this was merely a legend. But last night I scoured every ancient text and confirmed one thing. What's hidden within the moonstone isn't a single phrase, nor a name, but a complete visual memory. Your mother used the last of her bloodline's power to personally record the truth of a war within the stone. That footage is enough to overturn the very foundations of the Silver Moon Empire's rule, and you are the only one who can unlock it. I am the only one who can withstand the backlash when you do. He turned to look at her, the morning light casting a golden glow on his silver, gray short hair. Do you want to come with me and see what your mother risked her life to leave for you? She hardly hesitated. I'll go. When those two words left her lips, Ivy was taken aback. She hadn't expected her answer to be so quick and decisive. Just 3 days ago, she had been the girl in the gray dress, hiding among the servants, too afraid to even lift her head. But now, standing in the side hall of Black Wolf Castle, she was telling a lord of the border, I'll go to the north, a place her mother had repeatedly warned her never to approach since she was a child. Her mother had said, the frozen gorge in the north is the graveyard of the White Wolf clan. Our ancestors lie buried there, and so do our sins. Yet now she was going there, with the man her mother had once saved. Cassius didn't give her much time to think. That evening, after arranging the castle's defenses, he led her out through the back gate, without a large entourage, taking only a personal aide and 2 of the fastest black-maned warhorses. He explained that the fewer people there were, the less likely they'd be noticed. The elder spies were stationed at every post in the north, and any large-scale movement would tip them off. The 2 rode through the night. The night in the north was far colder than in Silver Moon City, and the wind cut across their faces like knives. Avie wrapped herself tightly in a wolf fur cloak that Cassius had forced upon her. The fur was thick and soft, keeping the cold at bay. It was Cassius's own cloak. When he took it off and handed it to her, he remarked dryly, If you freeze to death, no one will be able to open the moonstone. But Avie noticed he was wearing only a thin corset underneath, with indentations from his armor still visible on his shoulders. His words were tough, but his actions gave him away. On their first night, they took shelter in a hunter's cabin nestled in the mountains. The cabin was crude, containing nothing but a wooden plank bed and a pile of hay that reeked of molds. The aide-de-camp voluntarily stood guard outside, leaving only her and Cassius inside the cabin. The fire danced in the hearth, casting their shadows onto the rough stone walls, flickering in and out of light. Avie sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees, watching Cassius crouch by the hearth as he stoked the fire. His profile was sharply defined in the light. The shadow cast by his brow bone obscured his dark golden eyes, allowing her to gaze at him surreptitiously and without restraint. You've been staring at me the whole time. Are you afraid I'll sell you off in the middle of the night? He didn't turn around, a hint of teasing in his tone. Avie's face flushed instantly, and she quickly looked away. I wasn't looking at you. I was watching the fire. The fire's in the hearth. Your gaze is fixed on the back of my head, at least 30 degrees off. Could you please not be so perceptive? Cassius finally turned to glance at her, a rare, faint curve forming at the corner of his mouth. It was the first time she'd seen him truly smile. Not cold, not sarcastic, devoid of any calculation, just a simple expression of amusement at having teased her. That smile lasted less than 2 seconds. Yet it made Avie's heart skip a full beat. She quickly lowered her head, pretending to adjust the ties of her cloak, her ears burning bright red. Go to sleep. Cassius stood up and stoked the fire in the hearth a little higher. We'll be traveling all day tomorrow. Once we cross the ashen wastes, we'll enter the territory of the frozen gorge. It's much colder and far more dangerous there than it is here. You'll need your strength. What about you? Avi asked, looking up. Where will you sleep? Cassius pointed to the pile of dry hay beside the fireplace, sat down directly on it with his back against the wall, and closed his eyes. I'll keep watch, but you've been riding all day too. I'm used to it. Go to sleep. Don't worry about me. He said it casually, as if soothing an unruly child. But Avi noticed that after sitting down, he placed his sword within easy reach, and his ears kept twitching slightly, a telltale sign of an alpha on high alert. Even with his eyes closed, he was monitoring every sound around them. He was trading his own sleepless vigil for her peaceful night's rest. This realization washed over her like a warm current, carrying a heavy, unfamiliar sensation, the feeling of being held close to someone's heart. She lay down, wrapped herself tightly in the cloak that still retained his body heat, and closed her eyes. The cloak carried his scent pine, gunpowder, and a faint rust like tang of blood. It was his mark. Enveloped by that scent, she miraculously fell asleep. In the middle of the night, she was startled awake by the sound of extremely light footsteps. They weren't the footsteps of the adjutant outside the door. Those were too heavy, carrying the muffled thud of iron boots on frozen ground. These footsteps were as light as a cat's, almost imperceptible, but the white wolf blood in her veins made her instinctively sensitive to such sounds. She snapped, her eyes open. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, leaving only a faint glow of dark red. The cabin was dark, but by that faint light she saw Cassius had risen, his hand on his sword hilt, his entire body like a fully drawn bow, radiating a dangerous aura of readiness to strike. He made a sheesh gesture toward her. Then, from the darkness outside the door, came a piercing wolf howl. It was followed by a second, then a third rising simultaneously from all directions, as if something were closing in on the hunter's cabin from every side. These aren't ordinary wolves. Cassius's voice was so low she could barely make out his words without reading his lips. They're the shadowhounds bred by the Silver Moon Queen. They can track the fluctuations of moonstones. Avi's heart leapt into her throat. She instinctively covered the stone on her collarbone. But as if sensing her fear, the stone began to glow ever brighter, like a small moon in the darkness too blinding to hide. It's glowing on its own? Her voice trembled. The moonstone has sensed a threat and is actively protecting you, Cassius said urgently, though he remained as steady as a mountain. But at the same time, it's revealing your location to those shadowhunt wolves. He made his decision, moving so fast that Avi couldn't even see it. He had already drawn his sword and kicked the cabin door open. Outside, countless shadowhounds crouched in the night. They were twice the size of ordinary wolves, with ghastly green eyes and pitch, black fur that blended almost seamlessly with the darkness. The leader was exceptionally massive, thick saliva dripping from the corners of its mouth, as it emitted a low, menacing growl. "Stay close," Cassius said without looking back, then charged forward like an arrow leaving the bow. A silver arc of swordlight sliced through the night as he severed the forepaw of the first hunting wolf to pounce, sending it rolling to the ground with an agonized howl. A second wolf lunged from the side. He spun and drove an elbow into its skull, the sound of shattering bone clearly audible. His movements were crisp and precise, every strike a killing blow, without a trace of flashiness. But there were too many hunting wolves. More and more green eyes surged out of the darkness, seemingly endless. Cassius's second-in-command was entangled by 3 hunting wolves and couldn't break free. Avi stood at the doorway of the hut, clutching the moonstone tightly in her hand, with only one thought in her mind. She couldn't be a burden here. Her mother was the chieftain of the White Wolf clan, and the blood of the strongest warriors flowed through her veins. Yet she had never even killed a chicken in her life. What was she supposed to do? Just then, the lead giant wolf, taking advantage of the moment when Cassius was entangled by 4 or 5 hunting wolves, lunged suddenly at his back, its gaping maw aimed straight for the back of his neck. In that instant, Avi's body acted before her mind could process it. She didn't know how she ran over there, nor where that speed came from. She only felt the moonstone burst into a searing glow, and a power unlike any she'd ever known exploded from her chest, spreading through her veins to every limb and bone. She opened her mouth and let out a sound she'd never heard before, a sound that didn't belong to a human, a wolf's howl, clear, high-pitched, and imbued with the majesty of ancient bloodlines. It shattered the night sky. All the hunting wolves froze in that very instant, not out of fear, but out of suppression, the suppression of bloodlines. The White Wolf clan was one of the oldest werewolf lineages in the north, the origin of all werewolves on this land. Even the shadow hunters bred by the Silver Moon Queen, despite generations of genetic modification, could not resist this primal suppression emanating from the depths of her bloodline. The lead giant wolf's pounce halted abruptly midair. Its limbs went limp as it crashed to the ground, and for the first time fear flashed in its green eyes. Cassius did not waste this opportunity. He spun around and drove his sword through the giant wolf's throat. Blood gushed forth, and upon seeing their leader fall, the pack of shadow hunters finally scattered, fleeing with their tails between their legs into the darkness. It was all over. Avi stood amidst the pile of wolf carcasses, gasping for breath. The power that had surged from within her moments ago receded like a tide, and her legs gave way. Cassius caught her before her knees hit the ground. He planted his sword in the ground, knelt on one knee, and held her securely in his arms. He looked down at her, his dark golden eyes churning with a complex mix of emotions, shock, concern, and a hint of something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Just now, his voice was hoarse. You used your bloodline to subdue and intimidate the shadow hunt wolves. That's not something an ordinary white wolf can do. It's a feat only a clan leader's bloodline is capable of. Avi leaned against him, her whole body trembling. She was terrified too. In that split second, it felt as though a more ancient, more powerful soul had taken residence within her, issuing commands through her throat. The sensation was both strange and familiar, as if a memory sealed away for far too long had been awakened. I don't know how I did it. Her voice was as faint as a wisp of smoke. That voice, I didn't mean to let it out. It just came on its own. The moonstone pressed against her skin, still radiating a faint warmth. That heat felt like a comfort, yet also a warning. The dormant power within you is awakening. But are you ready? Cassius said nothing, only held her tighter. One of his hands cradled the back of her head, pressing her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, fast yet steady, as steady and powerful as a drumbeat, each thud transmitting a sense of security from his chest to her eardrums. The wolf pack may have retreated, but the Silver Moon Queen will soon learn of their deaths, he said, lowering his head so his lips were almost touching her bangs. She will certainly send stronger hunters to hunt us down. Starting tonight, we can no longer stop to spend the night. We must travel day and night without rest, reaching the frozen gorge before the next wave of assassins arrives. Can you still hold on? Avi lifted her head from his embrace. Her face was less than a hand's breadth from his chin, close enough to make out the thin old scar along his jawline. She nodded. Though her voice was still a little weak, her gaze had regained its resolve. I can. She stood up from his embrace. Though her legs were still trembling slightly, she held her back straight. Cassius watched her steady herself again, and said nothing. But as he turned to lead the horses, That faint curve reappeared at the corner of his mouth. It was the second time he'd shown her that almost tender expression. Then he composed himself so quickly that she almost thought it was a hallucination. But this time, it wasn't a hallucination. The aide approached from a distance, leading 2 warhorses. Seeing the 2 of them, he tactfully asked no questions. The snow-covered wasteland glowed with a faint blue light before dawn. On the distant horizon, the outline of a mountain range, forever frozen in ice and snow, was faintly visible. That was the frozen canyon. They continued on their way on horseback. As Ivy rode, wrapped in the cloak that still retained his body heat, the moment he had held her in his arms played over and over in her mind. That heart, once filled only with hatred and fear, felt as though something had pried open a crack in it, and something warm and soft was quietly seeping in. She wanted to seal that crack shut. She told herself that he was merely repaying a debt, that she was just an old debt he owed, and that all of this would end once the moonstone was opened. But when she stole a glance at his back as he rode away, she realized she no longer wanted it to end. That night, something between them had changed silently. It was as if the wind in the frozen canyon had finally chilled them both to the bone, or as if the claws of those shadow, hunting wolves had torn down the wall that had once stood between them. In any case, something was different, and they were getting closer and closer to the place where the truth was finally buried. This is the cruelest tenderness of fate. It makes you realize who you care about most only at the most dangerous moment. When your life hangs in the balance, the first thing that springs to mind isn't your escape route or your secret plan, but the clean, decisive swing of his sword as he stood in front of you. In that moment, you realize that some feelings simply cannot be faked. By dawn, they had finally crossed the ashen wastes. Riding on horseback, Avie spotted the mountain range in the distance, the entrance to the frozen gorge. It was no majestic canyon, but rather a fissure torn from the earth by some colossal force, flanked by steep black cliffs covered in perpetual ice and snow that glowed with a blue, almost translucent light in the morning light. A wind swept out from the depths of the gorge, carrying an ancient, heavy breath, as if something had been slumbering at the very bottom of that fissure for centuries, waiting to be awakened. Cassius reined in his horse and pointed to a protruding rock on the left side of the gorge's entrance. "There's a mark there, left by your mother." Avie followed his gaze. On the back of that rock was carved a tiny pattern, a crescent moon with 3 wavy lines beneath it. She recognized the symbol. When her mother taught her to write as a child, she would draw this pattern in the bottom right corner of every page. She asked her mother what it meant, and her mother said, "It's a signpost for the way home." So when her mother spoke of home, she hadn't meant that dilapidated rental in Silver Moon City. She'd meant this place. She dismounted, waded through snow that reached just below her calves to the rock, and reached out to trace the engraving. The lines were deep, their edges smoothed round by wind and sand. Yet still clearly visible, her mother's fingers had dug her nails into the stone, carving it stroke by stroke. She closed her eyes, as if she could see her mother crouching alone, before this rock on some snowy night, breathing out white mist, struggling to carve this mark with her frozen fingers. "When your mother carved this mark," Cassius's voice came from behind her, calm yet tinged with a barely perceptible sorrow. "It was the day after she sent me out of the canyon. She hid me in a hunter's sled, sending me on ahead, saying she'd catch up once she'd taken care of a few things. I was so badly injured then that I wasn't even fully conscious. When I woke up 3 days later and sent someone back to look for her, this was all I found." He pulled the half-moonstone from his bosom. It was almost identical to the half hanging around Ivy's neck. She broke her moonstone in half. She gave one half to me, saying it was a token of her love. She kept the other half for you. I've been wondering ever since. Did she know all along that she wouldn't be coming back, which is why she arranged everything in advance? A wave of sadness welled up in Avi's nose, but she bit her lip to hold it back. Now was not the time to cry. She took a deep breath of the icy air, letting the chill pierce her nostrils and rush to her forehead, suppressing the surging emotions. Let's go. Let's go inside and take a look. She turned her head. Her voice was steadier than she had imagined. I'm going to find what my mother left behind in this canyon myself. The two tied their horses in a sheltered spot at the mouth of the canyon, leaving the aide behind to watch over them. Cassius led the way, with Avi close behind, and the two of them trudged through the thick snow into the canyon. The canyon was much deeper than it had appeared from the outside. The rock walls on either side grew ever higher, gradually obscuring the sky. Sunlight filtered through only a narrow slit at the very top, forming a long, narrow streak of light at the bottom of the valley, like a golden needle, stretching their shadows thin and long. The temperature was dropping steadily. The breath Avi exhaled condensed into white mist in the air, and a thin layer of frost formed on her eyelashes. She wrapped her cloak tighter around herself and forced herself not to slow her pace. She knew that once she stopped, she might never be able to move again. We're almost there. Cassius glanced back at her, noticing her lips had turned slightly purple and his brow furrowed slightly. Just past that corner up ahead is where I was attacked all those years ago. The cave is on the cliff face right after the bend. He slowed his pace to let Avi catch up, then naturally extended his left hand, not to take hers, but to hold his arm out in front of her like a railing she could lean on at any moment. The path's slippery, hold on. Avi hesitated for half a second before resting her hand on his forearm. Through the thick sleeves and cloak, she shouldn't have felt a thing. Yet the warmth and firmness radiating from his muscular contours still shot through her fingertips like an electric current, causing her heart to skip a few beats against her will. She quickly lowered her head, pretending to focus intently on the path ahead. They rounded the corner, and the scene suddenly opened up before them. The canyon widened abruptly here, forming a natural semicircular hollow. Right in the center of the hollow stood a massive mirror, smooth black rock, towering like a natural altar amidst the ice and snow. And behind that rock, there was indeed an opening in the cliff face. It wasn't large, and was half hidden by creeping ice vines. If one didn't look closely, it would be impossible to spot. That's the place, Cassius pointed to the opening. Back then, your mother dragged me into that cave and treated my wounds there. Avi's heart began to race. She walked step by step toward the opening. The snow beneath her feet crunched with every step, and the silence was so profound that all she could hear was the wind and her own breathing. She reached the entrance and reached out to push aside the ice vines. Their touch was bone-chillingly cold. But her fingers did not flinch. It was pitch black inside the cave. But the opening was deep enough. Just as she was about to crouch down and crawl inside, suddenly, the moonstone around her neck burst into a blinding silver light. The glow pierced through her clothes, shooting into the cave like a searchlight and illuminating a rock wall deep within. The wall was densely covered with inscriptions. Ancient Wolf Clan script. Avi's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the text. It was a family history. The history of the White Wolf clan, beginning with the founding of the Northern Ice Plains Kingdom by the first clan leader through the Rebellion War 300 years ago, and on to the flight, hiding and dwindling of their bloodline that followed the war. It was all carved into this stone wall, written in the blood of one person, her mother's blood. She knelt before the stone wall, her fingers trembling as they traced the inscriptions. At the very bottom of the wall, she found the final line her mother had left behind. My daughter, Avi, by the time you read these words, mother will be gone. Do not cry. Mother leaves with no regrets. For I have left you the most important thing of all. Not this moonstone, not the glory of the White Wolf clan, but the right to choose your own destiny. The Silver Moon Queen does not fear the White Wolf clan's military might. She fears the truth. And every word carved into this stone wall is the truth. Take it out of here and let everyone know. The White Wolf clan never betrayed the Empire. It was the Empire that betrayed us." Tears fell silently, dripping onto the stone wall and blurring the ancient inscriptions. Avi knelt there, her shoulders trembling, yet she bit her lip hard to keep from making a sound. Cassius stood behind her, saying nothing, simply watching over her in silence. He knew this moment required neither words nor comfort. What she needed was to let out this final cry, then stand up and face the truth. After an unknown amount of time, Avi finally lifted her head. She roughly wiped her face with the back of her hand, stood up and turned to face Cassius. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her gaze was no longer lost. The Moonstone's activation requires the blood of a blood relative, combined with a sincere willingness to give. Her voice was hoarse from crying, yet unusually firm. "I know who I need to find to help me fulfill the second condition." Cassius looked at her, saying nothing, but his breath faltered ever so slightly for a second, as her words fell. "I owe your mother a life, and I owe you the truth," he spoke, his voice so low it seemed as if he feared shattering something. "If the price of activating the Moonstone is for someone to willingly sacrifice everything for you, then I am willing." Avi's heart felt as if it were being squeezed tightly by a hand. "Do you know what this means?" Her voice trembled slightly. The phrase, "willingly give up everything" in the Moonstone's activation spell isn't some romantic promise. It will actually drain the bloodline power from your body, and might turn you into an ordinary, powerless werewolf. You are the Lord of the Borderlands, the King of the Black Wolf clan. Are you willing to lose all of that for a woman you've known for less than 3 days? Cassius looked at her, his dark golden eyes burning like 2 flames in the dim cave. He smiled. Not a mocking smile, but a faint, gentle one, as if he had laid down a heavy burden. "You've known me for less than 3 days, but I've been searching for you for 10 years. I'm not just here to repay a debt. If you think that every time I survived the battlefield over the past 10 years was just to come back and repay a life, then you're underestimating me. Avi, you aren't the mission your mother left me. You're the person I chose to come back for." The words fell into the silence of the cave, like a feather landing on a drumhead. So light they made almost no sound, yet causing the entire space to resonate. Avi stood there, tears welling up in her eyes once more, but this time the tears felt different. She took a step forward, then another, until she stood before him. She tilted her head back, looking up at the man who towered a full head taller than her voice trembling yet clear. "All right, let's open it together. No matter what is sealed within this stone, no matter what the Silver Moon Queen has prepared for us, no matter what this path may cost me, I'm not afraid anymore." For the first time in her 19 years, she spoke those 4 words. "I'm not afraid anymore," from the bottom of her heart. And the reason she could say them was because she knew there was someone standing behind her. That person had walked through blizzards for 10 years, just to stand before her and say, "I found you." This is the deepest secret of fate. You thought the Moonstone held the truth your mother left for you, but the key to unlocking it was never some ancient spell, but a person willing to give their entire life to fulfill a single promise. When you finally no longer have to face this world alone, you will fear nothing. I'll do my best to think about your question. Let me think it over carefully. Avi reached into her collar and pulled out the half-moonstone. In the dim cave, the silver stone emitted a soft yet steadfast glow, like a tiny heart that had been beating inside her chest for 300 years. She looked at Cassius, who was looking back at her. No more words were needed. They both knew exactly what to do next. She bit her index finger until it bled, then pressed the drop of blood against the surface of the moonstone. The blood was instantly absorbed by the stone, as if parched earth had finally received rain. The moonstone began to tremble violently, emitting a low hum, and its silver light surged to a blinding intensity, illuminating the entire cave as if it were broad daylight. The ancient wolf clan script on the stone wall seemed to come alive in the glow. The strokes flowed, rearranged themselves, and transformed into living images. Ivy stared in astonishment as the characters flew off the wall and surged into the moonstone like a silver river. Then, Cassius reached out and took the hand with which she was holding the moonstone. His palm was much larger than hers, dry and warm, his fingers intertwining with hers, clasped tightly together. He looked down at the glowing stone, his voice low yet firm. "I, Cassius, king of the Black Wolves, swear by my bloodline and my soul. I am willing to devote everything I have to the owner of this moonstone. Whatever the cost, I do so willingly." No sooner had he spoken than the moonstone burst into brilliant light. A searing energy erupted from the stone, surging through their clasped hands and into their bodies. Avi felt a tidal wave of power flood her veins, like an underground river frozen for too long, suddenly breaking through the ice and rushing forth. Her body arched involuntarily, and a low moan, somewhere between pain and release, escaped her throat. And the hand she was holding, Cassius's hand, suddenly grew scorching hot. She could feel his power being drawn away along that connection, like a receding tide, like a river changing course. His breathing grew ragged, and cold sweat beaded on his forehead. But he didn't let go. His eyes remained fixed on her, never wavering for a moment. "Don't be afraid." His voice was hoarse, clearly strained, yet still gentle. "Continue." Tears welled up in Avi's eyes, and she nodded vigorously. At that moment, the moonstone finally erupted with its most intense burst of silver light. And then, in a single instant, all the light contracted, condensed, and exploded. A flood of images surged into Avi's mind. She saw the Northlands 300 years ago, a white castle standing tall on the ice plains. The silver moon flag fluttered from the castle's towers, not the Empire's current golden moon, but the old flag, silver and bearing the white wolf totem. She saw her ancestor, the first chieftain of the White Wolf clan, a towering man with silver hair and silver eyes, standing atop the castle's highest tower, gazing into the distance. Then the scene shifted. She witnessed a private meeting. The former queen of the Silver Moon Empire and the current queen's grandmother sat across from each other at a long table. A map of the entire north lay spread out on the table. The older queen's finger rested on an area marked White Wolf territory, her voice icy. "They must not discover what lies buried beneath this land. For the stability of the empire, for the purity of our bloodline, they must be exterminated." She saw the chieftain of the White Wolf clan kneeling before the Silver Moon Queen, pleading with a hoarse, desperate voice, "We are willing to surrender all our territories and relocate to the most remote and bitterly cold lands, if only the Queen will spare our people. They know nothing, they are innocent." Then she saw the Queen's reply. Those words were like a poison, tipped dagger piercing through 300 years of time to strike deep into Avi's heart. "Innocent, none who know that secret are innocent." The scene shifted again. She saw the battlefield, countless Imperial soldiers clad in silver armor, riding shadow-want wolves, charged into the White Wolf clan's territory. Flames shot skyward and the battle cry shook the heavens. The elderly women, children, not a single one was spared. She saw a figure that looked exactly like her mother, clutching an infant, running frantically through the snow. As the pursuers closed in from behind, the woman hid the baby in the hollow of a fallen ancient tree, then turned and walked toward the pursuing soldiers. That was her grandmother, the last matriarch of the White Wolf clan 300 years ago. She had lured the pursuers away with her own life, trading her existence for a chance at survival for the unborn child in her womb, the child who would later give birth to her mother. She saw even more. She saw the true reason behind the White Wolf clan's annihilation. Not because of inferior bloodlines, not because of attempted rebellion, but because the White Wolf clan had guarded an ancient seal deep within the frozen gorge for generations. Beneath that seal lay a monster, created by the Silver Moon Empire's first empress, using forbidden magic. A colossal blood wolf stitched together from the souls of countless werewolves. It was the Empire's darkest secret, the ultimate weapon forged by the first empress to conquer the entire continent. But the blood wolf's power spiraled out of control. It turned on its creator and was ultimately sealed deep within the frozen canyon by the ancestors of the White Wolf clan at the cost of their lives. Every queen of the Silver Moon Empire, throughout history, knew of this seal's existence. They weren't afraid of a White Wolf clan rebellion. They feared that one day the White Wolf clan would reveal the secret of the seal to the world, exposing to all that the Empire's very foundation was built upon a lie centered around a forbidden entity. So they silenced them. They killed every member of the White Wolf clan who knew this secret, then rewrote history, portraying the White Wolf clan as traitors. This is the truth. This is what her mother fought so desperately to leave her. Avi knelt on the ground, her whole body trembling. Tears blurred her vision, but she bit her lip hard, refusing to let a sound escape. She couldn't break down here. Her mother hadn't left all this for her so she could collapse. The image slowly faded, and the glow of the moonstone gradually dimmed. The text on the stone wall returned to stillness, as if nothing had ever happened, but everything had already changed. Avi slowly raised her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her gaze was like steel tempered in fire. A blood-red resolve ignited amidst the grief, giving her an aura entirely different from before. So that's how it is. Her voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. The Silver Moon Empire's foundation is a prison built upon lies, and the White Wolf clan, they were the sacrificial offerings used to bury the truth alive. She turned to look at Cassius, and her heart clenched violently. Cassius was kneeling on the ground, his face as pale as paper, his lips devoid of any color. The hand holding the moonstone hung limply at his side, his fingertips trembling slightly. The power that had been drained from him moments ago had nearly exhausted all the alpha bloodline energy within him. He hadn't lied to her. The second condition for activating the moonstone truly would strip an alpha of everything. Cassius, she rushed over, kneeling before him, cupping his face in both hands. His skin was ice cold, his breathing shallow and rapid, but those dark golden eyes remained open, still fixed on her, weak yet resolute. Are you okay? Her voice trembled as tears fell in a steady stream onto his pale cheek. He looked at her and actually managed to smile. The smile was as fragile as a flower that could be scattered by the wind at any moment. Yet it was still that smile of his part stubbornness, part nonchalance, and part tenderness. I'm fine. I won't die. His voice was low and somewhat wavering, but every word was clear. I promised your mother to protect you, and I'll keep my word. You madman. Avi could no longer hold back her tears. She pulled his upper body into her arms and held him tightly, as if trying to transfer her body heat to him. Who told you to go this far? I've only known you for 3 days. Then in the future, get to know me for a few more years. His voice grew softer and softer, tinged with a weary smile. Once I've regained my strength, then you can scold me all you want. Avi held him, crying and laughing at the same time. She had never felt so helpless, yet she had never felt so at peace. The truth was like a knife, slicing through 300 years of the Empire's lies, but it also cut through the thick shell surrounding her own heart. For the first time, she realized just how afraid she could be of losing someone. And this person, just 3 days ago, had been nothing more than a stranger's name. She wiped away her tears, helped him to his feet, and let him lean against her shoulder. The moonstone had fulfilled its mission. Its light had completely faded, transforming into an ordinary pendant with a faint silvery sheen. It was no longer the vessel that sealed the secret. The secret had now entered her memory, never to be taken away again. From now on, the Moonstone no longer needs to guard any secrets. Ivy looked down at the stone, her voice calm yet full of strength. It is I who must protect it. It is I who will seek justice for the White Wolf clan. She helped Cassius to his feet. He was much taller than her, and most of his weight pressed down on her, but she gritted her teeth and held firm. Her legs were trembling, but she did not buckle. We're going back now. She gazed at the light streaming in from the canyon's exit in the distance, her eyes as resolute as tempered steel. You opened the Moonstone for me. Now it's my turn to open a path for you, a path that will bring the truth to light. The wind from the depths of the canyon blew up behind them, like the sighs of the White Wolf clan's 300-year-old souls, or a call that had traversed the ages and finally received an answer. And this was fate's ultimate answer. You thought the heaviest thing in the world was the secret itself. Number the heaviest is the one willing to bear that secret for you. He drained his own bloodline to light the path to the truth for you, and you must walk that path for the rest of your life, carrying his share with you, walking it together. She supported Cassius as she made her way step by step out of the frozen canyon. Each step was steady, though her legs were trembling, and his weight pressed painfully on her shoulders. She did not stop. The snow reached her ankles, and a bone-chilling cold spread from the soles of her feet throughout her body. Yet a fire burned within her, a fire inherited from the Moonstone, carrying 300 years of anger and resentment belonging to the White Wolf clan. As they emerged from the mouth of the gorge, the aide spotted them from a distance, his face turning pale with shock. He sprinted over to help support Cassius. "My lord, what on earth?" "I'm fine." Cassius waved his hand. Though his voice was weak, his tone still carried an unquestionable authority. "Just a bit of bloodline depletion. I'll recover after a few days of rest." The aide glanced at Avi, then at Cassius's pale face. His lips trembled, but in the end he asked nothing. Silently, he helped Cassius onto the horse. The return journey took twice as long as the trip there. Cassius spent most of the time in a deep sleep. He woke up a few times, and each time the first thing he did was roll his eyes to look for Avi, only closing them again after confirming she was still there and safe. Avi pretended not to notice this little gesture every time, but in a corner of her heart something was slowly crumbling. She was starting to feel afraid, not of the Silver Moon Queen, nor of the Senate's warrant for her arrest. What she feared was the realization that she was growing increasingly dependent on this man. The only rule for survival she had learned in her 19 years was never to depend on anyone. Dependence was a weakness, and weakness could be fatal. Yet, in the face of Cassius, that rule crumbled like a paper wall, collapsing at the slightest push. She bit her lip, forcing the thought down. Now was not the time for such thoughts. She had committed the truth within the Moonstone to memory. The footage, the conversations, the sealed secret of the Blood Wolves, and the guilt the White Wolves had borne for 300 years. Each of these revelations was enough to topple the very foundations of the Silver Moon Empire, but only if she survived to carry them out and speak them in a place large and influential enough. But she had no power, no army, no political allies. She had only a half-crippled alpha and a horse that was nearly too exhausted to run. By the time she returned to Black Wolf Castle, it was already late into the third night. The butler nearly lost his footing when he saw Cassius's condition. He quickly arranged for someone to help him back to his room and summoned the castle physician that very night. Avi stood outside Cassius's door. Through the crack, she saw him lying in bed, while the physician used silver needles to seal off the residual bloodline power surging chaotically through his body forces that had become disordered due to the Moonstone's extraction. If not sorted out promptly, they could cause him permanent damage. She stood outside the door for a long time, until the physician emerged, nodded at her, and said, "His life is no longer in danger, but he'll need at least a fortnight of rest." Only then did she exhale the breath she'd been holding. She leaned against the corridor wall and slowly slid to the floor. The moonstone's silver glow had completely faded, resting quietly against her collarbone like an ordinary smooth stone. Yet in her mind, that vision kept replaying. She could see the castle ablaze, her clan members being hunted down in the snow, and the scene of her grandmother hugging an infant and hiding it in a tree hollow. That infant was her mother's mother, her great-grandmother. If that tree hollow had been discovered back then, her mother would never have existed in this world. Nor would she, nor would the person sitting on the cold stone floor right now, clutching a stone, her mind consumed with thoughts of how to overthrow an empire. She suddenly understood her mother's dying words. Guarding that secret is more important than guarding your own life. Not because her mother's life was unimportant, but because this stone contained the unspoken words of all the White Wolf clan's fallen souls over the past 300 years. On the fourth morning, Cassius awoke. The first thing he did upon waking was to throw back the covers and get out of bed. Though his steps were still a bit unsteady, he forced himself to walk to the door of Avi's room and knocked. There was no answer. He waited a moment, knocked again, but still there was no answer. He frowned and pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The small pot of purple flowers on the windowsill had withered in the cold. On the desk lay a letter, held down by that moonstone. Cassius's heart sank. He walked over and picked up the letter. It had no signature and no salutation. Just a few lines in Avi's handwriting, slightly crooked, as if written in a hurry, or perhaps with a trembling hand. "I've gone to Silver Moon City. I'm going to the Council of Elders myself to reveal the secret within the moonstone. Don't come looking for me. You've already done more than enough for me. If I return alive, we'll talk about the rest then. If I don't make it back, take care of yourself for me, and keep that half moonstone as a memento." In the lower right corner of the paper, there was a small smudge where a tear had blotted the ink. She had been crying when she wrote this letter. Cassius clutched the letter, his fingers tightening until his knuckles turned white. He looked down at the half-moonstone. It lay quietly on the envelope, its warm luster like a silent farewell she had left behind. An emotion he had never felt before surged up from the depths of his chest, searing, fierce, and unstoppable. It was anger. It was fear. It was fear. It was something deeper than anger and fear. Something he didn't even want to admit to himself. He was afraid of losing her. This realization struck him like a sledgehammer to the chest, shattering all his reason. He snatched up the half-moonstone, tucked it close to his body, turned, and strode out of the room, his voice low yet carrying an unquestionable force. "Saddle the horses, the fastest ones, and gather 12 elite riders. I must reach Silver Moon City before nightfall." The butler froze. "My lord, you haven't fully recovered. My body doesn't matter." Without turning back, his voice carried an urgency so intense it trembled. "She matters more." The sound of hooves thundered along the cobblestone road outside Black Wolf Castle. Cassius swung himself into the saddle, with 12 black-armored knights close behind. The morning light cast a golden glow over his silver-gray hair. His face remained pale, but the fire in his eyes burned more fiercely than it ever had on the battlefield. He galloped on, a single thought dominating his mind. She must not die, she must not. The woman who trembled at the auction yet dared not lower her head. The woman who said, "I'm not afraid in the cave." The woman who, though barely able to stand herself, insisted on helping him out of the frozen gorge. How dare she go to her death alone? How dare she? Meanwhile, far away in the square before the Council of Elders in Silver Moon City, a young woman clad in a dark gray cloak was walking step by step toward the heavy bronze gates. Her hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and her face bore the weariness of a night's journey. Yet her back was as straight as a drawn sword. In her hand, she clutched the moonstone that no longer glowed, her gaze as resolute as if she were heading to a rendezvous whose outcome she already knew. People in the square gradually took notice of her. Some recognized her as the servant the Black Wolf King had taken away at the auction a few days earlier. Some whispered among themselves. Others pointed and gaped. The guards at the entrance to the Council of Elders had already noticed her approach and had their hands on their sword hilts. Halt. This is a restricted area of the Council of Elders. Unauthorized persons are not permitted to approach. She did not stop. She kept walking forward until the tip of the guard's blade was just a fist's length from her throat, and only then did she pause. She raised her head, looked at the two guards, and spoke in a voice that was not loud but clear enough to be heard in every corner of the square. My name is Avi White Wolf. I am the daughter of the last chieftain of the White Wolf clan. I have come here to reveal to all of the Silver Moon Empire a truth that has been buried for 300 years. The guards' expressions changed. The whispers in the square instantly swelled into a clamor of murmurs. Some began running toward the interior of the Senate to sound the alarm. The bronze gate slowly swung open, and a figure emerged. Cecil Gray, Chief Elder of the Silver Moon Empire's Senate. The old werewolf looked at Ivy, his gaze as dark and foreboding as a storm cloud. You actually dare to return? His voice carried undisguised murderous intent and barely contained astonishment. Do you realize you're asking for death? Ivy looked at him and smiled. There was no fear in that smile, no anger, only a serenity that transcended everything. I know, but I know even more, that some things are more important than life itself. She raised the moonstone high. Bathed in the morning sun, the stone reflected a blinding silver light, like a tiny signal flare exploding over Silver Moon City. 300 years ago, the first queen of the Silver Moon Empire created a forbidden weapon known as the Blood Wolf. That weapon spiraled out of control and turned on its creator. The ancestors of the White Wolf clan sealed it away at the cost of their own lives. And to cover up this secret, the Silver Moon Empire wiped out my entire clan under the pretext of rebellion. Her voice echoed across the empty square, each word driving like a nail into the ears of every onlooker. This truth has been sealed within the moonstone passed down through generations of the White Wolf clan. And now I have unlocked it. I have seen everything. She looked Cecil straight in the eye and asked, word by word, Your Excellency, the Chief Elder, do you dare in front of the entire city to deny what I have said? Cecil's face turned from livid to deathly pale, then from pale to ashen. His fingers trembled, his lips quivered. He wanted to speak, but no words came out, for he knew that every word she had spoken was true. Just then, the sound of urgent hooves came from the entrance to the square. Everyone turned to look. A black-maned warhorse galloped toward them. The man on its back had short silver-gray hair whipped by the wind. His face was as pale as paper, but a fierce flame burned in his dark golden eyes. Behind him rode 12 fully armed knights in black armor, their hooves pounding the cobblestones in a rhythm as steady as war drums. Cassius reined in his horse, leaped down, and stood in the center of the square. His gaze swept through the crowd, fixing firmly on Avi. She froze. She hadn't thought he would come after her. She'd left that letter precisely to ensure he stayed at Black Wolf Castle to recover. He'd already sacrificed so much to activate the Moonstone. She couldn't let him lose his title as Lord of the Frontier, or even his life, for her sake. But he had come. He had come. After all. Cassius strode over to her and grabbed her wrist with one hand. His fingers were ice cold. His bloodline power had not yet returned, and his body was still weak. But the grip he placed on her wrist was firm, without a hint of wavering. "You're very brave," he said in a low, breathless voice. yet one tinged with a gritted teeth tenderness. You left a letter and dared to come here alone to die. Ivy's lips trembled. She wanted to say, "This is my own business." But as she looked at his pale face and the anxiety in his eyes, an anxiety so intense it nearly burned her, all the words she'd prepared choked in her throat. "You said it yourself. You chose this path." Cassius looked down at her, his dark golden eyes mere inches away. "But have you ever considered that I chose this path too? Your path is my path. You said you're afraid of depending on others. It's fine. I don't need you to depend on me. You just need to let me stand by your side." Those words struck like a gentle, yet powerful punch, shattering every one of Avy's defenses. Her eyes welled up in an instant, but she held back fiercely, refusing to let the tears fall. She reached back and took his hand, their hands clasped together, their cool fingertips touching, then slowly warming. A growing crowd had gathered at the entrance to the council hall. Nobles, merchants, commoners from Silvermoon City, and even border lords who had rushed in from other cities. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the young couple in the center of the square, focused on the moonstone held high above them. Cecil's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. He knew there was no way through this today. He gritted his teeth, about to order the guards to forcibly seize them. But before he could speak, an aged voice suddenly rang out from the crowd. "What she says is true." Everyone froze. An elderly woman with white hair, leaning on a cane, slowly stepped out of the crowd. She wore plain linen clothes, her face etched with the furrows of time. But her eyes, those eyes, filled with tears the moment she saw the moonstone in Ivy's hand. "You are a child of the White Wolf clan, aren't you?" The old woman's voice trembled. "I recognize that stone. I saw it when I was a child. The clan chieftain's wife wore it." Avy was stunned. "You are." "I am a descendant of the survivors from back then." The old woman spoke, slowly rolling up the sleeve of her left arm. On her upper arm was a deep, now faded mark, an old scar left by a werewolf's bite. "During that massacre 300 years ago, my great-grandmother escaped with 3 children and hid in an underground cave for 7 whole years. Until her dying day, she kept repeating, 'One day, the truth will return.'" The old woman turned to face all the onlookers in the square, her voice hoarse yet loud. "I can testify. The White Wolf clan has never betrayed the Empire. The order to massacre the White Wolf clan back then was signed by the Silver Moon Queen herself. My family still keeps a copy of that secret decree. My great-grandmother found it in the ruins all those years ago." The square erupted in an uproar. Immediately, a second and then a third person stepped forward. Some produced a yellowed letter. Others held up a badge once worn by a White Wolf warrior. Still others knelt on the ground, weeping as they revealed secrets about the massacre passed down through their families for generations. "Before my grandfather died, he told me he was conscripted to fight in the north, only to discover upon arrival that it wasn't a war at all, but a massacre. My father was one of the soldiers tasked with burning the bodies back then. He said half of those bodies were the elderly and children. The queen has been lying to us for 300 years. Avy stood among the crowd, watching as more and more people came forward, watching the truth spread like an unstoppable tide. Something seemed to choke her throat, and tears finally fell. They weren't tears of sadness, nor of anger. They were tears of mixed emotions, born of a grievance suppressed for 300 years, finally seeing the light of day. Cassius stood beside her, clasped her hand, and whispered, "You did it." She looked up at him. Her vision was blurred by tears, but she could still make out the gentle light in his eyes. We did it." She turned her head to look at the bronze gates slowly swinging open. Inside the council chamber, people had already begun rushing about in panic, arguing, and trying to quell the storm. But it was too late. The truth was like the light within a moonstone. Once released, it could never be locked back into the darkness. The situation continued to escalate. More and more people began to speak out. The entire city of Silvermoon trembled, the tremors spreading from the square to the streets, from the streets to the taverns, to the harbor, and to every corner. Within 3 days, news of the truth about the White Wolf clan had spread like wildfire throughout the entire empire. The border lords of the north began assembling their forces. Some openly declared their support for Avi, others secretly sent messengers to Black Wolf Keep, and still others led their clan's young men directly to Silvermoon City to lend a helping hand to the descendants of the White Wolf clan. Cecil attempted to suppress the news, ordering the arrest of anyone spreading rumors. But for every person he arrested, 10 more stepped forward. He attempted to send assassins to kill Avi. But Cassius's 12 black armored knights stood guard day and night, not letting even a fly get through. He even tried to mobilize the garrison in Silvermoon City to suppress the gatherings in the square. But a third of the garrison consisted of soldiers from the north, and they refused to obey the orders. The foundations of the Silvermoon Empire were shaking at a visible pace. On the 7th day, the Council of Elders finally reached its breaking point. Cecil was forced to convene an emergency session. After an all-night debate, the council passed a resolution by a narrow majority. The Council of Elders would formally accept the White Wolf clan's petition for a retrial of historical injustices and summon Avi White Wolf to appear at a hearing. But everyone knew this was merely a delaying tactic. The Silvermoon Queen had yet to make an appearance, nor had she issued any statement regarding the upheaval. She was waiting for the storm to subside on its own, or for an opportunity to uproot the very core of the storm. Avi knew this as well. The night before the hearing, she sat on the windowsill of the Black Wolf Fortress's tower, gazing toward the distant city of Silvermoon. The night breeze was cool, ruffling the ends of her hair. She held the moonstone, which no longer glowed, in her hand, her fingertips repeatedly caressing its smooth surface. Cassius approached silently and stood beside her at the windowsill. He said nothing, simply gazing at the same night sky with her. After a long while, Avi spoke, a rare vulnerability in her voice. "What if I fail tomorrow?" Cassius didn't answer directly. He was silent for a few seconds, then reached out and gently, carefully, took her fingers, moonstone and all, into his own hand. The warmth of his palm stood in stark contrast to the night breeze outside the window. "We won't fail," he said. His voice was low and steady, like a rock beneath deep water. "Because you won't be standing alone in that hall." She turned her head to look at him. In the moonlight, his profile was sharply defined, and those dark golden eyes were fixed on her. They needed no words, for they already held all the answers. "Do you ever say the 3 words, 'I'm afraid'?" she asked. "I do." He looked down at her, and that faintest of smiles reappeared at the corner of his mouth. "Just now, when you were sitting on the windowsill and almost fell backward, I was scared." Avi's face flushed, and she looked away, pretending to gaze at the moon. But the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, despite her best efforts. "After the hearing is over, if I'm still alive." "Don't say if," he interrupted her. "It's after it's over." She paused, looking into his serious, intense eyes. Her chest felt as though it were being filled with something, a sensation that was both aching, swelling, and warm. "All right, after it's over, we'll have a proper talk." He nodded, then pulled the half-moonstone from his pocket, the one her mother had split in 2 years ago and given him half of. He fastened it next to the one already around her neck, the 2 half-circles pressed tightly together, finally forming a complete circle. The moment the 2 stones touched, they emitted an extremely faint hum, as if sealing some ancient pact. "Once all this is over, we'll find a good spot and bury the moonstone." His voice was like a whisper in the night breeze. "It no longer needs to guard any secrets. From now on, whatever you need to protect, I'll take care of it." Avi looked up at him, the night wind ruffling her hair and stinging her eyes red. She wanted to say so many things, to say thank you, to say I'm sorry for worrying you, to say that the unfinished part of that letter I'd written was, if I come back alive, I want to stay, but she said nothing, because the next day, the sun rose as usual, and this war that had spanned 300 years finally reached its final judgment. And this was fate's cruelest yet gentlest arrangement. It made you meet the right person at the most dangerous moment, and let you see your deepest desires when you were at your weakest. The moonstone has become one again, joining the two broken halves into a complete circle, just like your destinies. After 300 years of separation and 12 years of searching, you have finally come together under the same night sky to form a complete answer. On the day of the hearing, the sky over Silver Moon City was leaden gray. Heavy clouds hung over the city, as if the entire sky were holding its breath for this trial. Avi stood before the gates of the Council of Elders, dressed in a long dark gray gown, her hair tied back in a simple yet neat bun. Around her neck hung the now whole moonstone. It rested quietly against her collarbone, radiating a warm and steadfast glow. Behind her stood Cassius. He had changed into a dark formal tunic, the dagger passed down through 6 generations of border lords, sheathed at his waist. Though his complexion still bore a trace of pallor from his incomplete recovery, his back was as straight as a mountain. Behind him stood 12 black armor knights, and beyond them, a sea of people. The citizens of Silver Moon City stretched from the square all the way to the end of the street. No one had organized them, no one had called them to gather. They had simply come of their own accord to witness the truth that had been buried for 300 years. Cecil stood on the steps inside the Senate's entrance, his expression as stormy as the sea before a tempest. Behind him stood a dozen or so members of the council. Their expressions varied. Some were tense, some angry, some averted their gaze guiltily, and a few showed a barely perceptible wavering in their eyes. A.V. White Wolf, as the heir of the White Wolf clan, you have petitioned the council to reopen the case regarding the historical characterization of the White Wolf clan. Cecil's voice echoed through the empty corridor, cold and formal. The Senate has accepted your request, but you must understand, if the evidence you provide is insufficient to overturn the verdict from 300 years ago, you will be arrested on the spot for slandering the Empire and inciting rebellion, and face life imprisonment. I am aware. Avi's voice was uncharacteristically calm for a young woman about to face trial. She stepped onto the platform, turned to face the dense crowd filling the square. Those faces filled with suspicion, anticipation, or tension, took a deep breath, and then spoke. I stand here today not for revenge, not to reclaim any territory, nor to overthrow the Silver Moon Empire. Her voice was not loud, but carried by the wind. It reached every corner of the square. I have come to return something, to return the truth. She raised the moonstone. Its silver glow remained clearly visible beneath the leaden sky. As if sensing its master's resolve, it emitted a low heartbeat, like pulse. Avi closed her eyes, allowing the vision within the moonstone to be replayed before the world through her voice, her words, every tremor of her body, and every tear. She spoke of the secret the White Wolf clan had guarded for generations in the frozen gorge. She spoke of the Blood Wolf, the forbidden weapon created by the first queen. She spoke of the sealing process, of the Silver Moon Queen's order to exterminate the clan to conceal the truth, of the night her grandmother fled through the snow clutching an infant, and of the warmth of the stone her mother pressed into her palm before dying. She spoke for a full hour. Not a single person left the square. When she uttered her final word, the entire city of Silver Moon was enveloped in a profound silence. Even the wind fell still. Then an old man in the crowd was the first to kneel, followed by a second. Then a third. Wave after wave of the crowd, like wheat swaying in the wind, slowly sank to their knees. Not before the Council of Elders. Not before the queen, but before her, before the young woman who, single-handedly, had shouldered 300 years of injustice to walk back into the sunlight. A fierce argument erupted within the council chamber. Some slammed their fists on the table, others threw documents to the floor, and still others pointed their fingers at Cecil's face, shouting insults in rage. Those counselors who had originally stood by Cecil's side began to defect one by one in the face of the evidence and public opinion, and just as the chaos reached its peak, the door at the very back of the council chamber swung open. A figure clad in a golden robe and crowned with a silver moon tiara emerged slowly. The queen, the current queen of the Silver Moon Empire, Astria Silvermoon. A woman who had ruled this land for nearly 40 years. Her hair was now streaked with gray, yet her features remained as stern and chiseled as ever. Her gaze swept across the chaotic Senate chamber, over the bickering members, and finally settled on Ivy. "Are you the descendant of the White Wolf clan?" Her voice was not loud, yet it felt like a bucket of cold water poured into a boiling cauldron. All the arguing ceased abruptly. "I am." Ivy met her gaze directly, without flinching. The queen remained silent for a long time, then did something no one expected. She slowly removed the crown from her head and placed it on the council table. "The decree to exterminate the White Wolf clan 300 years ago was issued by my grandmother. I did not participate, but I inherited that secret, and that sin." The queen's voice was calm, so calm it was as if she were speaking of something that had nothing to do with her. "This secret has weighed on me my entire life. Every night, I dream of the eyes of the White Wolf, clan's departed souls. Do you think I didn't want to reveal the truth? I have thought about it, but I cannot, because once the truth is exposed, the very foundations of the Silver Moon Empire will be shaken, and the entire werewolf world will plunge into chaos and war. I chose stability. I chose to let more people live, even if that choice is a dirty one." She paused, her gaze falling once more upon Ivy. For the first time, a hint of something resembling weariness appeared in those majestic eyes. "But you have shown me another choice. You've shown me that while the truth may bring pain, it is only after that pain that true survival becomes possible." She turned to all the elders, then to the sea of people in the square, her voice aged yet resolute. "I hereby declare the designation of the White Wolf clan as traitors, and all related judgments are revoked. The honor and status of the White Wolf clan are restored. The frozen canyon and its surrounding territories are returned to the heir of the White Wolf clan." The crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted into thunderous cheers. The sound was like a thunderstorm that had been building for 300 years, exploding over Silvermoon City and shaking the entire city to its core. Ivy stood at the center of the cheering crowd, tears silently streaming down her face. She had thought she would smile, but instead she wept like a child. In her hand, she clutched the moonstone, the stone that held her mother's final warmth and the 300-year history of the White Wolf clan, which had finally fulfilled its final mission. After the crowd dispersed, the square returned to calm. A crack finally appeared in the leaden gray clouds, and sunlight poured through the opening, falling on the wet cobblestones and coating them in a warm golden glow. Ivy sat on the steps in front of the council hall, too exhausted to stand. Her eyes were still red, and her voice was hoarse, but on her face was the first genuine carefree smile she had worn in 19 years. Cassius sat down beside her. Neither of them spoke. They simply sat shoulder to shoulder, watching as the sunlight filtering through the clouds bathed the entire city of Silvermoon in golden light. After a long while, he finally spoke. "What I said that night. Once this is over, let's have a proper talk." Ivy turned her head to look at him. The sunlight cast warm shadows across his chiseled profile. Those dark golden eyes were fixed on her, their depths aglow. "You still remember," Her voice was soft. I remember every word I said. Avi's heart began to race uncontrollably again. She lowered her head, her fingers unconsciously tracing the now still moonstone, her voice slightly hoarse. So what do you want to talk about? Cassius was silent for a few seconds, then reached out, his long fingers resting over the hand holding the moonstone. He didn't press hard, just gently and carefully covering it, as if touching something he had waited far too long for. What I want to talk about is whether you're willing, not just because of my mission, not just because of the debt I owe your mother, not just because you're the one I'm protecting. His voice dropped, so low it was almost carried away by the wind, but every word fell clearly into her ears. Are you willing? Be the one I stay for. Avi's breath caught completely in that moment. She turned her head to look at him. His expression was so serious that a faint blush crept up to his ears. The Black Wolf King, who struck terror into the hearts of enemies on the battlefield, the Lord of the Frontier who overturned tables at auctions, was now sitting beside her, like an awkward teenager, asking her with great care if she would. She smiled. Her eyes were still brimming with unshed tears, but she smiled. A smile as radiant as sunlight breaking through the clouds. She reached back to take his hand, their fingers intertwining. The two moonstones pressed together, glowing with a warm, soothing light in the golden sunlight, as if they were two hearts that had finally found one another. There was something I started to write in that letter but never finished. Her voice trembled slightly, but it was firm. The second half was, if I come back alive, I want to stay. Stay by your side. Cassius's fingers tightened suddenly, as if afraid she might run away. He looked down at her. The emotions churning in his dark golden eyes were finally no longer suppressed. Like ice and snow accumulated over an entire winter, melting in spring into a rushing river. He lowered his head, his forehead gently resting against hers. Their breaths intertwined, so close she could make out the curve of his eyelashes. You can't run away. His voice was low and gentle, like a sigh that had traveled through a decade. The two of them sat there on the steps in front of the council hall, the sunlight stretching their shadows long and far, bathed in a warm golden glow. In the distance, atop the rooftops of Silver Moon City, white doves flapped their wings as they soared into the blue sky, like some ancient yet fresh blessing. The moonstone had fulfilled its mission. The secret had been revealed, and the injustice cleared, and the girl who once believed she could only live in the shadows could finally stand in the sunlight, holding the hand of the one she wanted to hold, walking toward a tomorrow where she no longer had to flee. This was fate's ultimate answer. It was not for the secret within the moonstone to change the world, but for the one willing to believe in the truth to find, on the path to discovering it, something more precious than the truth itself, the destiny she had chosen for herself.